Ogor Mawtribes 4th Edition Index Review, Constructive Feedback Edition, TLDR Summary. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Gutbusters are fat daughters of Cain, and Beastclaw are dead on arrival. In this video, I give honest, well-intentioned feedback, trying to help out the suffering half, while praising the good work half of Ogor Mawtribes. Gutbusters. Very fun, but very simple. They're good right now, but as something that's just wounds and damage, after the initial release window, once people get more comfortable 4th edition, they might get taken to school by armies that don't have to play by the rules. There are a lot of those armies in 4th, by the way. Your two wizards are stellar, and very much work as build-around me's. One of the problems with Beastclaw is that they have nothing really to build around, but Gutbusters are great for this. However, it is a bit of a house of cards. Most of the war scrolls here aren't doing anything, so it becomes a melee damage efficiency contest, which the gluttons handily win. Some might find their war scrolls a bit boring or blank besides stats, but it's not boring when you do 30 damage. Beastclaw Raiders. In the transition to 4th, they lost just about everything that made them fun, interesting, or good. It's a withered apple core of a faction. An elevator pitch for Beastclaw in 4th Ed is 6 bad monsters that die easily, but at least they capture 10, I guess. That's it. That's what we are now. No hammers, no anvils, unreliable, fragile, just move 10, capture 10, and die. It's like if Sons of Behemoth were only allowed to take Man-Crusher Gargants and no Megas. And they had to hug terrain like Sylvaneth. That's the playstyle. I hate it. I had a bunch of test games before writing this, for the army I've enjoyed through thick and thin since 1st edition, inspired me to start doing AOS content creation on YouTube. And I honestly can't think of anything fun to say about them. Now, Beastclaw has been bad before. They've been really bad before. Whatever. Back when all our monsters had capture 1, and the game was played on objectives, so you almost by definition couldn't win a game unless you tabled your opponent very early. But you had the stats to almost do that sometimes. There was a Dragonfall in the Adepticon where I won like 2 games total across 2 5-round events, but I still had fun. Because huge impact hits on fast anvils with Frostwreath Ice was OP, even if you lost on points. I consider it something really special. When you can lose with an army, but still have fun. Beastclaw aren't not fun now because they're bad or lose a lot. They are bad and also not fun. Weak monsters that just capture 10 means the gameplay of modern Beastclaw is stealing objectives while running away from superior opponents, avoiding fights, and losing engagements while bean counting victory points. This is not fun. Can points fix them? No. The war scrolls are just bad. What I really don't want is to be cheap, bad monsters the army. That's what we are right now. How many cheap, bad bodies that capture 10 can I fit on the table? If points went down so I could play 1 extra cheap, bad unit, it wouldn't suddenly be fun. I want the exact opposite. I want their points to go up, but for them to be awesome. So anyway, instead of just saying they're bad and moving on, I'd like to give as constructive and helpful feedback as I can. Itemized and down the whole list. Thoughts and reasoning for everything in the hopes it'll matter. From both a tooling around in the details point of view, but also maybe a more helpful player feelings point of view. First, I want to talk about identity. Gutbusters are big melee damage glass cannons with high capturing, high damage. They have lots of wounds and some healing, but I wouldn't necessarily call them a durable army. They sometimes do a few mortals on the charge, and they have several shooting units that are all bad. Beastclaw are swingy but low overall damage, glass cannons with high capturing, fragile. They sometimes do a few mortals on the charge, and they have several shooting units that are all bad. I think these two things are maybe too similar. I'm wondering what the design intent for Beastclaw is in 4th edition. I feel like we had some clear signposts in the past. We were the fast side. We were maybe supposed to be the durable side, except we weren't really besides the single Frostlord General with that mount trait. Maybe the most impact hit side, even if that's a bit thin for a theme. Maybe the sniping side real early on. But all that stuff is gone now. Going forward, what do we do? Gutbusters are clearly the hammer side, and so Beastclaw maybe should be the anvil side. Instead, there's a good hammer side and a bad hammer side. Anyway, let's review the index. And we'll start with terrain features. I'll give them an A. Ogor Mawtribes is the only army in the game, I think, that has 2 terrain features, which is cool and probably appropriate, We are 2 armies put into 1 book after all. We got the Great Maw Pot, which is explicitly made for Gutbusters, and the Maw Pit, which is also explicitly made for Gutbusters. Why? You got 2 halves, right? The Maw Pot gives power level, but it has to target a wizard first, and BCR doesn't have any. We got priests, though. Power level works on priests. They should be able to target a priest, right? And the Maw Pit is garrisonable, but only by a butcher keyword. Why not an Icebrow Hunter? So these seem like easy fixes. Moving on to battle traits. C- maybe. Just super random, in a frustrating way. Something common in Destruction armies specifically, and if I can do nothing else with my feedback here, let me send the message. Destruction players hate that. We don't like it. All the Gloomspite players kept messaging me with sad emojis when they learned the stupid bad moon was still random. The emergent concept of silliness represented via rules should not mean fails all the time. That's not silly or fun. Please stop. Anyway, bad battle traits cause Ogre Mawtribes to live and die based on the power of their war scrolls, which isn't ideal, but it can be fine. Some factions lean into strong battle traits like Seraphon or Sylvaneth, and some lean into strong war scrolls like Skaven or Gargants. It can work. They chose the latter here. Trampling Charge. This 2-up on a D3 thing sucks. It's cool that you roll 1 fewer die while resolving abilities, but the 1 in 3 rate of dealing 0 is not okay. This fails all the time, and charging into combat is costly, especially now. When you charge as a glass cannon army, which we are, you're typically then slain outright by the opponent on the next turn, so it really needs to count. Figure out another way of getting us to want to take Frostsword on Thundertusk that once a game +1 on the roll carrot does not match the 300-point stick. Suggested fix, just have it be a D3 Mortals. Extending into charges is risky enough. D3 standard, D6 for reinforced units and monsters. Simple and clean. I was not going to suggest this at first glance, but now that I've played a bunch of games and seen the other indexes, it seems like 4th edition will have less damage, and Mortals thing was just not true, so there's no fear of breaking parity here. Gutbuster damage is already high, true, but that's all they have, and it'll degrade over time as the meta matures. Beastclaw need new war scrolls entirely, so that's a different conversation, but can be factored into the battle trade. Ravenous Brutes. Hungry and eating was a fun and flavorful rule that was also good. I'm sad to see it replaced by something that essentially only matters when we have run and charge, which for Gutbusters is always, and for us it's half the time, on one guy. And that it doesn't do anything with our shooting units, on both sides, which I guess would have been more annoying if any of them were worth playing, although they are not. This feels too much like an ability chopped in half, and spread partly here and partly on the 2 run and charge rules elsewhere. If it worked on redeploy, that would be an interesting trick, but it doesn't. If it worked with auto 6 run command, it would net us more movement on crucial turns, but it doesn't. Why does this thing go away once we've used Feast on Flesh? Feast on Flesh sucks. It's weird to have so many downsides to an otherwise pretty minor bonus in a vacuum. Suggested fix, let it work on redeploy so the army has 1 tactical trick, but not auto-run 6 commands, as I feel personally that Alpha Strikes are like a net negative for the game. Games are too long and the setup takes too long to have Alpha Strike end the game immediately. But maybe that's just my opinion. Also, it shouldn't go away after a feast. It seems like a silly punishment considering how bad Feast is. Speaking of, Feast on Flesh. 1 in 3 failure chance is not okay for a once per game ability. Please stop doing this. Once a game is downside enough, no need to double up. Also, once per game nothing happens, sure does feel bad. No, we won't be in 5 combats at once. We'll be in 2 and 1 will fail, and then Iron Gut will heal from 3 to 4 health. I don't see why it needed so many safety valves. Once a game, can't target the same enemy unit twice, takes away Ravenous Brutes, fails 33%, and you have to wait till end of turn so you could die in between. Suggested fix, putting on my player feelings hat, feels like ogres should always be eating. The vampires of destruction. Like every time they fight or every turn they're in combat, they should just be chowing down, and it follows that those bites would heal. More so for Gutbusters maybe than Beastclaw, but not as a rule, and these things can evolve. I suggest keeping the 2-up lingo that I hate, but triggering it every end of turn instead of once a game, and removing the target limit. If the enemy unit is still alive, then there's another bite to take, right? Also, the power of healing generally scales with durability, and those 5-up guts and 4-up wardless monsters make it seem pretty safe. Battle formation. 1 is A, the rest is F. Master Butcher, good rule. It's not mechanically exciting, but it makes your fun guys work more often, which is fun. The reason it's good is because Butcher and Slaughtermaster are strong enough to be build around me wizards. You're happy to take them first and build the list around them. Suggested fix, this will be taken closing in on 100% of the time for non-Beastclaw armies, and probably even some of those, but that's because it does something. I'm not sure if it's too strong necessarily, as there's nothing to compare it to. The other options are almost blank. Brutal stock. I already suggested above how impact hits should not fail, and it's crazy that this bonus doesn't do that either. The reason impact hits aren't fun anymore is that they do 0 constantly, not that they do 2 instead of 3. Also, this should definitely work on Mournfang. One of the many reasons why Mournfang have always sucked is because they somehow dodge all the best parts of our battle traits, army rules, buffs, and stuff. Suggested fix, have Trampling Charge work correctly as mentioned in battle traits, and then reimagine this ability. I remember listening to how battle formations would be less unit locked and more about playstyle. So why not let this sub-faction be the I want to do impact hits one, as in with Gutbusters if I'm into that, or Beastclaw if I'm into that. Maybe re-roll the impact dice or something, I don't know. It would take a lot to pull Guts away from the +1 to cast on their wizards, but at least give them the option. They did pick Meat Fist in third. Eyes of the Storm. This is bad because Beastclaw heroes are bad, and so playing a mixed army is just not tempting. You don't want any of those guys. It's also bad because anti-shooting Silver Bullet is not really worth a locked-in choice like this. Most armies do not have meaningful shooting, and so when you play against most armies, this doesn't do anything. I like how you're trying to get people to mix the two halves of the army, but this is way too explicit. There's too much keyword bingo preventing any meaningful synergies from naturally cross-pollinating. The spells, Butcher's ability, Slaughtermaster's ability, all that stuff doesn't work on BCR, and the single buff Beastclaw has only works on monsters. That kind of stops mixing dead right there unless a War Scroll has a neat trick, and they don't. The grass has to be greener on the other side of the fence for at least something. There's nothing Beastclaw War Scrolls do that Gutbusters don't do significantly better. In the past, you would sometimes see a Frostlord in Gutbuster lists, but the job it did then was fast Anvil. And he is now neither of those things. Maybe it's a better unlock for Noblars than a Tyrant, but that's a pretty sorry excuse for adding a guy to an army. And you wouldn't take this sub-faction with it, that's for sure. Suggested fix, give Beastclaw a reason to exist, and then this sub-faction should just be about eating or something. Feed your cannons. This is bad because Lead Belchers and Iron Blasters are bad. They aren't bad because they can't shoot in combat. If they're in combat, they're dead. It's funny that right now as I write this, I just noticed that you don't get the bonus unless you're within the combat range of a friendly hero. And I had written this off as fully useless before even realizing that it was actually much worse by having another hoop to jump through. Hey, alright. Suggested fix, again I bring up the playstyle not units talking point. Shoot in combat would be kind of nice for a lot of the Beastclaw monsters, which inexplicably can't do so naturally, from atop their mounts. Not even their breath weapons, come on. But I think that's more of a War Scroll issue on their part, rather than something that one would spend a choice on, right? A shooting formation is a good idea for Mawtribes. There's plenty of shooting units in both halves of it. But they're all so bad that I don't know if you can save them without War Scroll rewrites. I think they need War Scroll rewrites, as a matter of fact. This formation would have to grant an absurd bonus to make the units in this army that shoot playable. Better to fix the units themselves and give them something else here that would challenge +1 to cast in comparison for a shooting army, which I don't think could exist. But hey, I don't know, surprise me. If you turn down sniping, Iron Blaster might be okay. Heroic trait C. Great Gut Lord will be generally always taken for Gutbusters, awkwardly placed on a Butcher no doubt, for two reasons. One, there isn't really a good one for Guts, so you might as well protect against control score debuffs, and two, Tyrant sucks, and I think these are supposed to more be for him. Stopping penalties on, say, Frostlord attacks is potentially valuable, as our monster damage goes from mediocre to non-existent under debuffs. But that's every monster in the whole army's problem, not just him. Take the Priest. Suggested fix, I don't think there is really any saving this one. A Priest will always be more valuable for Beastclaw, and Gutbusters don't care. None of these are good for them, but they're good anyway. Booming Roar. -5 to each control score in combat is a potentially staggering benefit that some other army might find very strong, even if it is only against infantry. Infantry are great this edition. However, this isn't an army that's probably always winning control score regardless. but has trouble staying alive. So it helps where you don't really need it, and if you're dead, you can't contest. Furthermore, it kind of does the same thing as Great Gut Lord if you think about it. Suggested fix, reimagine, perhaps as a defensive trait to stay alive. Touched by the Everwinter. Since you essentially can't be a priest and a wizard at the same time, this one's Beastclaw only. I'm a bit put off that you need to take a trait to make Frostlords priests, since when they were a Huskard, they were a priest, but upon getting elected, they forget how to pray and forsake their gods? Is this political commentary? These kinds of traits, artifacts, formations that are clearly a puzzle piece taken out of a war scroll that should be there, only so that you can place it back in by spending a choice, have always slightly annoyed me. Suggested fix, Frostlord and Icebrow Hunter should already be priests on the war scroll. This thing should be a combat buff, maybe for tyrants. Artifacts D+. Gruesome trophies, because companion attacks are sad and lame, they can't benefit from this, which is a shame. The definitive hammers in 4th edition are reinforced infantry and cavalry. It's weird that companion exists to ban random 4-up to hit low number of attacks mount swings from any bonuses. They're already worse. It's weird. But hey, alright, it's a Gutbuster item. Even so, only granting a bonus against heroes and monsters is kind of limiting this edition. Neither of those are particularly great, in general. 3-inch combat range on infantry and buff sponge cav essentially blew monsters as a unit type out of the water. Suggested fix, it's a mediocre artifact, but still by far the best one, so I guess keep it as is. Not everything has to be great. Although I would let it work on shooting like it used to. Shooting is suffering already. The Fang of Guhur. Guts heroes can't reliably get into combat for this to matter, and you're taking wizards anyway, so they don't want to. Monster damage is too low and unreliable for this once-a-game risk to pay off. Suggested fix, delete. Bring back the Splatter Cleaver. It wasn't good, but it was fun, and people like fun. Then if Tyrant or Frostlord War Scrolls ever got good later, somebody might take it, and that'd be swell. Timmy needs choices too. Elixir of the Frost Wyrm. It triggers in a weird phase for being melee range, which means you have to survive combat to use it next turn. This is a big problem for Beastclaw, because we're so fragile. It generally only works against low damage enemies that have kept you in combat somehow. I stopped taking it after the 3rd game of not really getting a chance to use it. Suggested fix, reimagine fully. Skull of Dragar, granting an unbind was a fan favorite, maybe bring that back. Spell lore A, these are quite good. Troggoth Guts, healing is nice, just to top somebody off, and the control bonus is free. I like it. Suggested fix, it's mostly fine as is, but it would be funny to let you hit the same guy more than once with it. Like imagine some 2-man left alive Iron Gut unit suddenly double stuffed Oreo style +9 control score for a turn. It's kind of like harmless fun. I mean, just kill him if you don't like it. We're on a 5-up save now, surely you can manage. Greasy D, the 18-inch range on this thing makes it good. If it were 12, it'd be bad. Hey, sometimes there's a knife's edge. Keep it as is, I like it. Blood Feast, this is fun, and one of the main reasons gut casting is good. However, I don't know why this has to be infantry only. Why specifically exclude Mournfang? Why not companion attacks for monsters? The result of the bonus is staggeringly more significant on Gluttons or Iron Guts than it wouldn't be on a Stonehorn or even a Thundertusk, which is sort of my problem with companion as a downside in the first place. They'd get all of +2 mount attacks total. Like, is that so bad? Thundertusks would get +1. Suggested fix, allow this to land on everybody, especially Mournfang. As I mentioned before, the poor saps being banned from nearly all synergies is one of the reasons they always suck. Are we special enough for a companion exception like the Huskard buff does? Probably not, but a man can dream. Prayer lore F. Completely wrong direction. Us Beastclaw players have always wanted the Everwinter to do something, but boy did the monkey's paw curl on this one. Call the Blizzard is really not fun. I hate it. Not even implementation, I hate it as an idea. The kind of player interested in all cavalry monster mash, with big bases, wants to stay as far away from terrain-hugging Sylvaneth-style army rules as humanly possible. I've tested this out, even going so far as to play 5-drop, 5-priest lists to try and spread the tokens, plan ahead to where the fights will be in the future, issue other prayers, off-turn pray, set up rolling 10-ups over battle rounds 3 and 4 while keeping close to terrain, that was also close to objectives, with an opponent who really wasn't trying to play around it, and I got lucky on prayer rolls. I got the 5-up wards back for 2 battle rounds, and I got tabled anyway, because damage is high, and we are not durable even with the wards, much less without. It was the same thing in 3rd edition. This mechanic is kind of miserable. It's also the thing I hate, which is taking something out of a war scroll that should be there, and making you spin 50 plates into a handstand to put it back in. Suggested fix, delete it entirely. Just start over from scratch. This is why indexes are good. Counted it as a beta test. My feedback is this ain't it whatsoever. New version, nothing to do with terrain. No million hoops to jump through to get our ward back. It doesn't even have to give us a ward back, just no terrain. Maybe not even blizzard tokens. I can think of a dozen random things a wintry blizzard filled, bolstering magic, frost spirits, headwinds for enemies, tailwinds for friendlies could do. But to save time, I'll move on. Brainstorming is easy. It's iteration that's the tricky part. Alright, I can't help myself. What if you put the blizzard tokens on your own units? What if you put them on the enemy units? What if you put them on objectives? Anything but terrain is a good idea. Obscuring is bad. We don't want that. Could be anything else. Pulverizing Hailstorm is trash. Range is too short, 5 up to pray, and then a 1 in 3 to fail anyway. Why do I need to succeed at this prayer twice? Because it could possibly target more than one unit, even though it never does. This thing has a 22% chance to succeed. That's your 1 prayer on your 300-point priest for the turn. That's not okay. It's 56% if you already spent a previous action praying and have 5 points saved up. So after 2 turns, maybe a command point, you pass the prayer and then roll 2 and nothing happens. And then you lose all your prayer points because it technically succeeded despite nothing happening. This thing sucks. Suggested fix. The answer value should be 4 up, and the first target should take D3 straight away. Additional targets should get the 2 up lingo. This way you at least get your first target half the time, and only the additional target suffers 33 miss penalty since it's an added AoE effect. Or maybe have this be a prayer version of the Butcher's old slot machine spell, but maybe that thing is too silly and fun for 4th edition. Keening Gale, run and charge is good. Reroll run and charge is a strong bonus effect on an 8. It's a shame we can't run and shoot. We got a lot of random 1-of weird ranged weapons. I appreciate this being a buff that can land on Mournfang though, as since I point out whenever they're skipped, I feel the need to point out when they get it. Suggested fix, nah, this is okay I guess. On to the War Scrolls, and I'm going to skip Kragnos because 1, he is not an ogre, and 2, if you find yourself needing to play Kragnos, it means your book is bad. On that exact note, I was hoping to no longer have to play him like I did throughout all of 3rd edition, because our book was bad. This index did not spark joy as a Beastclaw player, let me tell you what. Gutbuster War Scrolls. Tyrant, D+. So player feelings hat. I look at this guy and I see 5 melee attacks, whatever, my troops are for damage, heroes are for buffs. He can't even cast spells and he costs 180. A Butcher or Slaughtermaster is so good that you build your entire army around them and they're 40 and 50 points cheaper. It makes you wonder what points are even supposed to represent at all. I see that he has armor and weapons, but those rarely matter. Perhaps once a game. Control score thing is more of a spearhead rule. At 2k, units tend to either be alive or dead. Then I look at force organization, and Noblars are locked behind taking him. Ah, I see. He's a tax. Something that you do not want, but you have to take if you want something else that you want. Except the point for me of cheap chaff is that it's cheap. And when that 1 unit of Noblars costs 300 points, it kind of defeats the purpose. That tax feeling I really think should be avoided. I think it's a bad way of getting people to play something. Butcher doesn't feel like a tax, even though you could think about it in a weird way, like maybe he's a tax to be able to cast your spells, but somehow you're excited to take a Butcher anyway. Tyrant's War Scroll should be that exciting. You shouldn't have to twist my arm to play the leader of the faction. Suggested fix, Age of Sigmar, for its entire lifetime, 1st to 4th, has had a problem where non-wizard priest foot heroes that are like just supposed to fight without any good buff to hand out are categorically bad. I'm sorry to see 4th edition hasn't quite cracked the code. I don't think taxation is the right angle. Is there a points value where I would play him over a Butcher? No. Rewrite this guy so that I'm, like, excited to play him as the leader of the faction. Instead of, well, I kind of want Noblars, and so even though I don't like this guy, I gotta, Slaughtermaster A+. I don't play Gutbusters, but I'm happy to see his cauldron finally shake off the stupid, not fun randomness of previous iterations and become really cool. Not being afraid to dump old rules and throw off tradition when it's just not working and try something new. You love to see it. He's a living mobile Mawpot with a great range that hands out excellent buffs, 5-up ward, and +1 attacks. This is the kind of War Scroll rewrite that I dared to dream of when they said they were going to go through all the scrolls and do them over. His stupid bad spell is just gone, it's replaced by a sweet rule, he's gameplay changing and a build around me. They zeroed in on what was wrong with him, and they fixed it and made him fun. 10 out of 10. Suggested fix. Do this good of a job on my half, why don't ya? Butcher S. Well, they got their one good wizard, surely the other one is just worse, right? Wrong. Another 10 out of 10. Run and charge aura. No command cost, not once a game, no stupid 2-up doesn't work, no rolling. It just works. Another auto-include that you're more than happy to take. I was watching the community discuss in real time which of these two was better, which one you'd take 2 of and which one you'd take 1 of, and that's just nice to see. They ended up on 2 butchers, by the way, but still, meaningful choice is a hard line to walk. Suggested fix. I promise I won't just say do this good of a job on my half, why don't you, every time. Bloodpelt Hunter. See, I won't be. I'll give him a D. This guy sucks. His job is monster killer. First of all, no he doesn't. And second of all, you don't want that job anyway. A full move on the opponent's turn is a strong effect. But not instead of a hero who does something. And not for 170. And not for a drop. Suggested fix. This one's unfortunate because Monster Hunter is his entire lore and models theme. Otherwise, I'd say drop that job for a useful one. If you pumped his stats, he could at best end up like a hero version of Cruel Boy's Beast Skewer Killbow, except as a hero, no thanks. I think he's doomed and probably unfixable. It's a shame I own one, and I rather like how I painted it up. Sucks I won't get to put it on the table again, but there was the one single season 2 years ago where your foot hero could teleport, so you tricked me into buying a paperweight I'll never use again. Hey, you got me. Gluttons A. Big meaty men slapping meat. The quintessential glass cannon, and your one efficiently costed hammer compared to what other armies are doing right now. Big damn, crap save, kinda fast with their free run and charge, and surprisingly high capturing. From what I've seen, you tend to get Feast on Flesh out of the way as soon as possible to unlock 3 control, even if using it is kind of a waste. But it's Feast on Flesh. Using it is kind of a waste. This is an interesting identity for Gutbusters, and I think it's a cool one. Glass cannon, but also high capturing. You wouldn't think they work together, but with enough damage they seem to. I just think it's neat. The War Scroll might look boring, and I guess it is, but like I said in the intro, dealing 30 damage is never boring. Suggested fix. I commonly hear 4-up save, but glass cannons are a legitimate archetype. I say keep it. The thing I would change, however, is the box comes with 2 Noblars with bases. Give Gluttons a rule that counts them as tokens. Maybe eat them to heal or something, I don't know. I just feel like they should have a gameplay use. Iron Guts B+. Plastic guts, am I right? Paper guts, etc. All the 5-up save jokes, and considering you only get 4 of them, the Gluttons 6, they are way too fragile for their price. Their damage is very similar to Gluttons after all, but I think the double pile-in does give them a meaningful enough role to see play. They also have a Tyrant Bodyguard rule, which was intelligently changed to grant them a ward as well, which was smart, because they are more important than him for sure. Suggested fix. I would keep their points high, but give them 5 wounds to represent the iron in some tangible way. Otherwise, maybe change their name after losing that 4-up save. If they could bodyguard any hero, it would fully solidify their role in the army, I think. But maybe their inclusion rate will be high enough already as it is, I don't know. Alright, I'm back. Where were we? Man-Eaters, F. I mean, these are just going away, right? They've always been terrible, and I suspect as a mercy so as not to trick people into buying Finecast with a time limit. Anyway, they don't have the Gutbuster keyword, and they're too similar to Gluttons, while costing 50% more per model. That's it. Suggested fix. Rip the band-aid off and retire them, or cost them pretty much the same as Gluttons. They'd still be worse on account of the keywords and be unplayable without a tyrant, but you'd get some shooting in exchange. That's nice. Firebelly C. Same comment as Maneaters, but C is the lowest a wizard could ever go this edition, even one so terrifically overshadowed as the Firebelly. Man's War Scroll is empty and has the wrong keywords, but he can cast Blood Feast, Unbind, and summon endless spells, so he's way better than a Tyrant. 40 points cheaper, too. Suggested fix, as per Maneaters, except reference Butcher instead of Gluttons. Gorge Mawpack, B. These guys are Gluttons with an ambush, and I think that's a useful role to have in the army. 6-up save, no Gutbuster keyword, can't be reinforced, and no charge bonus, so they won't be landing and charging right away. Leads me to feel that 260 is way high. But, as a War Scroll with a job that is also capable of doing that job, you can overpay for it, and then it'll still work on the table. It's up to you to get its points worth. It's just very risky to do with that save, and you lose a hell of a lot of points if anything hits them on a spike charge roll. Suggested fix, points 220. This one's actually just a points issue, and that's rare, so it's refreshing when it's true. Leadbelcher's F. Why did these suck before? Because they did no damage. Why do these suck now? Because they do no damage. These have historically been played as chaff, such is the level of their badness, and the War Scroll did not get any better. They also lost a rend. I don't think they should be chaff levels of bad War Scroll. Suggested fix, in the Battle Tome, I hope these at last get reimagined as what the players have been asking for forever. These dudes are 9-foot-tall ogres holding broadside cannons at the hip. Those shooting profiles should start acting like it. Chip shooting chaff is a sorry state for them to be in. Special note, random attacks characteristics are the opposite of fun. Switch the damage and the attack's value first and foremost, then tweak their output until useful. Ogres are an army, where the pistols do D3 and the cannons do 1. That's weird. Iron Blaster C-. I find myself resenting this unit's forgettable melee attacks because it means the points for it always have to be higher than they should be. No one took this once it went to 200. It got a lot worse in 4th. Foot heroes are invisible and cannot be targeted. Can't snipe with this thing. Both of its attacks got worse. Its range almost halved. 240's crazy. Suggested fix. People are desperate to put this cool looking model on the table so that they can miss twice and pass the turn. There is some points value where it's good, but it doesn't start with 2. Gnoblar Scrap Launcher. C-, sadly better than Iron Blaster. This thing has an air of disdain in the Ogre community, because you could have built the coolest huge cannon ever out of the box, but instead you made the really stupid catapult with tiny goblins all over it. Yuck. Suggested fix. If Reign of Scrap just triggered off of targeting rather than slain models, people would have to play with this awful looking thing, and they would feel terrible as they sadly added it to their lists. Maybe still not due to keywords and drops, but if you want to cause pain, make that change and then add the Gutbuster keyword and watch a bunch of Ogre players regretfully put it on the table. Gnoblar's A, but only if you can play them. They're kind of in prison. These guys are great chaff, and they were a mainstay of Gutbuster armies in 3rd edition. Now they require a tyrant, which almost ruins army building. Suggested fix. Add the Gutbuster keyword. If you want people to play a tyrant, make him fun. Don't blackmail us into it. Same thing with Frostlord on Thundertusk. Gutbuster thoughts. At first glance, it's clear what people will be doing with this army, as the cream rises to the top very quickly when everyone is just wounds and melee damage. Then it's just math. There's a lot of ancient stuff here that Ogre players are collectively just kind of waiting to retire or replace. The key point to tackle here clearly starts with the Tyrant. The de facto leader of the faction really shouldn't be a tax guy that you don't want to play with. I've seen people do it, but I'd rather be happy about playing him than backed into a corner. We gotta figure something out with him for the Battle Tome on the War Scroll level. Put some fun in there. Give him some casino nonsense. And also admit that if you're not a synergy hero, then you're useless. The sorry state of shooting is another big deal, since there are a lot of those units here just languishing, which really feeds into its internal balance problem. If only melee damage War Scrolls are useful at all, then you're getting into a melee damage efficiency contest and the Gluttons are just winning that. I would not suggest right now increasing the points on Gluttons, unless Ogres are like dominating win percent for a while. as nerfing gluttons is synonymous with nerfing ogres, and if the army isn't too strong, then there's no reason to make it weaker, right? Big melee damage run and charge is the exact kind of mono red army that's always good in a new meta where no one kind of knows what's good yet. I'd give it a minute, see how things settle out. Internal balance is a war scroll issue, not really a points issue. Besides Gorgers. Beastclaw. On to the Beastclaw Raiders. So as not to repeat myself in all these entries, I'm going to tackle the two basic monster types without the riders here and then get into specifics on their entries. The basic Stonehorn monster is not good. Very unreliable attacks that end up low overall. 4 up save with no ward. 10 move no flying. Kinda bad, but captures 10 at least, which is not an exciting sentence to sum the whole thing up. Stone Skeleton became a funny meme in test games where I'd take 25 damage after saves and all-out defense, and then I'd be like, wait, hold on, Stone Skeleton, I take 24 instead, and then pick him up. And then everyone laughed and clapped. Anyway, suggested fix, I think these should be anvils. 1, to differentiate Beastclaw from Gutbusters, and 2, because the only times this army's been good is when Stonehorn are hard to kill. If they die easy, like now, the faction just rolls over. Whatever you do, please get rid of the D6 attacks on the hooves. I hate random attacks characteristics. I'd rather it be a 3 than a D6. I'm so sick of rolling low. Random was done right in Skaven and done wrong here. It's fun when you always get the thing, you just might explode afterwards, which was a brilliant idea and fitting for Skaven. It's not fun when it just means you always miss and on average you suck. While Stonehorn aren't good, the basic Thundertusk monster is downright terrible. All the same problems except 3 melee attacks total, that hit on 4s with Rend 1. That means 0. Unless you win the lottery, and if you're a monster that does no damage and dies easily and isn't fast, like, what are you for? Just capture 10? Ice Blast has a short range, 1 attack that always misses, can't shoot and charge, can't shoot in combat, can't shoot if you're dead. I've dealt damage with Frost Wreath Ice all of 1 time in 4th edition so far. Most of the time I don't get to roll the attack, and the few times I have, it misses anyway. Suggested fix. The breath weapon should be able to shoot in combat, but really this is another identity problem. Except the Thundertusks has been a very long-standing one. They have always been the ranged monster, to the Stonehorn's melee monster. But since 2nd edition, they've been mostly unplayable, because they either do a piddly irrelevant amount like D3, whatever, or are anti-massive regiment, which wasn't really a thing in the meta at the time and also was bad at that job in any case. It's clear now that giving them meaningful range damage is simply not an option. So maybe we need to shift themes. Losing Frost Wreath Ice altogether wouldn't be some betrayal of tradition for me or anything. Shit, it's been dead since 2nd edition. What's the point in hanging on? They need a distinction from Stonehorns that gets both of them useful and fun. Since shooting isn't allowed, maybe Stonehorn need to charge and are high risk but high reward. And Thundertusk have a debuff aura and they're consistent good stuff for the risk averse. Is that different enough? I don't know. Having 3 Thundertusks all be priest and all 3 Stonehorn not be priest, maybe that's the sensible way forward. And probably my main suggestion. In any case, I think they both need to be some kind of anvils to differentiate them from Gutbusters, and to be good besides. Even more than Stonehorn, this monster type needs a start over from scratch approach. As long as the identity is not cheap and bad but captures 10. That would be the worst world, which is also the current world. On identity we have 2 monster types, but also the 3 rider types, Frostlord, Huskard, and Beast Riders. The Frostlord type has historically been the anvil and hammer, but that proved too good all in one place for internal balance, and I agree. The non-Frostlords have always been bad in comparison, and that's basically the whole history of Beastclaw in summary. The solution you went with in 4th edition seems to be, well, then no one's an anvil, but that means the army just sucks. So maybe walk the idea back a little. What if Frostlords were true hammers? Huskards were the buff-debuff wagons, and Beast Riders were the true anvils. This gives everyone a useful job. Beast Riders being full anvils might seem counterintuitive, but non-hero units seem to be where we find the anvil role, like Blight Kings, Chaos Warriors, Old Hearthguard, etc. To summarize my 2 options to fix identity problem here, either 1, all Thundertusks are priests, and all Stonehorns aren't, and there's no trait, but everyone's quite durable. Or, Frostlords are hammers, Huskards are priest buff, debuff wagons, and Beast Riders are true anvils. One of the 2. Monsters as a general type are kinda weak this edition compared to cavalry and infantry. Probably makes this safe to pull off right now. There's nothing intrinsically great about monsters anymore now that 3-inch combat range doubled, or even tripled, the damage of every other unit type. The companion keyword feels like a balance to rein in monster damage left over from 2nd ed. It feels very out of place in the reinforced 3-inch range edition. I think it's safe to have Beast Rider anvils. Anyway, on to the units themselves. Icebrow Hunter D+. It pains me not to give him the F he deserves, but he's a free attachment to a Frost Lord, and he can score battle tactics a turn after he ambushes sometimes. That being said, you probably just take Frost Sabers instead of him and save the points. I know I do. I slightly resent this, but I have to admit putting anti-monster on every one of his profiles is a good meme. Dream big, little guy. You won't be doing that. Suggested fix, same one as the last time. Make him a priest on War Scroll. When it's a trait, it will never land on him. Let him stand on a maw pit, get power level from a pot, do a prayer, anything besides deploy near a board edge and then run away. Frostlord on Stonehorn, C-. Aside from the mount being weak, the additional Frost Spear attacks make his damage okay on the charge sometimes. But I wouldn't trust him as a proper hammer. You need to get too lucky, and those debuffs hit him too hard. Frost Spear ability is blank text, just like before. It never matters. His Rampage doing free D3 mortals is nice up front, but only hitting one target makes the 2d6 fly generally a nothing burger. It's a big pile-in. Most of the time I don't even end up moving him at all. Going down the 2d6 Rampage was a meaningful downgrade with his base size. It means only boxcars get you the kind of playmaking leaps that were commonplace at 3d6, which is fair enough. In 4th edition I feel this kind of zany fun is less okay. Suggested fix, this guy worked in 2nd and 3rd edition because he was an anvil. Now that he's not, he sucks. He's just a fragile monster with random ass damage. It captures 10. Not a fun place to be. If he's supposed to compete with Gluttons and Iron Guts as a hammer, then geez, put him back at 400 something and his attacks need to be like entirely mathematically doubled to match their output, which is just silly. If he's supposed to be an anvil without a ward, then his War Scroll might start looking like a Mega Gargant on wounds value. I recommend Glass Cannon, but only if the rider types have the distinct jobs and Beast Riders become anvils. In any case, ditch that Never Matters Frost Spear ability for something fun that ever has a chance to meaningfully work. Frostlord on Thundertusk, D+. Besides the base monster being real bad, the once a game your impact hits can't fail is clearly supposed to be the sugar pill for this otherwise awful man. But lining that up is more trouble than it's worth when he's otherwise so bad. That's the army's problem every time they charge always. Once a game isn't enough. This is another tax thing like Tyrant. Make me want to take him because he's cool, not because once per game he does something we should just always do. The Rampage is awkwardly timed in the movement phase, so I found the best use for him is getting stuck in against a low damage anvil if they have one. Otherwise he dies before getting to use it. Interesting that he doesn't have the Frost Spear ability despite having a Frost Spear, but that ability sucks and never matters, so I guess I don't care. Suggested fix, either fit him in the hammer role or become a natural priest with a War Scroll prayer. Power level 2 for sure, considering how much you're paying for him. Huskard on Stonehorn, C-. He's maybe the best one, for what it's worth. This one has a Rampage buff, which was very nice to see an attempt made on that front. Combat range is very short for it, though, and this should be able to hit Mournfang. Otherwise, same problem as all Stonehorn. Kinda bad, but captures 10. Suggested fix, depends on which of the two options at the start. If he's a buff-debuff wagon, then Everwinter's Goad should probably be a War Scroll prayer. If he's a hammer with a combat buff, then he should be good at fighting, which he isn't. Or good at not dying, which he really isn't. Huskard on Thundertusk, D-. Same problem as all Thundertusks. It sucks. The Rampage is too failable on a 4-up and only works against infantry and he does 0 damage. So you need a lot more points in the same place to capitalize. Getting some kind of strike last is an ability that this army really needs. We straight up lose to activation wars for sure. Our answer to those used to be a bunch of impacts, but that's no longer an option. Strike last without any damage just means your opponent waits an extra 30 seconds to kill you anyway. He does not ever want to enter combat with these stats. Suggested fix, strike last is a good idea to put somewhere in here, and it feels like an Everwinter style ability, but not as a Rampage, and not for a guy this terrified of the combat phase. Putting that on a War Scroll prayer with a good range makes a lot more sense. As a buff-debuff wagon, he should be hanging back, tossing out strikes last as a prayer and then rightfully die when someone comes to get him. If he's a debuff or a combat man, then he needs a stat line that can do something in a fight besides instantly die. Stonehorn Beast Riders, D. Same problem as all Stonehorn, except he's got nothing else. His rampage sucks. You can slide into an objective sometimes, but only on the charge, which you would have been able to do anyway from the charge roll. Expensive and random, not a good combo. Vultures are useless, but I guess that was the goal. Suggested fix, make him a legitimate anvil. Nurgle Chaos Warrior style. It would give him a decent role to play both in Beastclaw and potentially even a mixed army. His random low damage would be more forgivable if he was doing something else in the meantime. Shoot in combat with all of his weapons is a must. Reimagine his rampage. Perhaps 3-up he counts as having charged for the weapon bonuses but not the impacts. Thundertusk Beast Riders, F. Same problem as all Thundertusks. These guys are at the very end of the race to the bottom on points, and it's the start of the edition. You're currently considering spending only $240 on a worthless model because it technically captures 10. Very sad. The rampage sucks because it only works on the charge. Why can't he use his breath weapon in combat? Suggested fix, as per other Beast Riders. Make him a legitimate anvil. His rampage, if it worked on a 3-up in any combat, would be a nice fit for an anvil capturer. Shoot in combat with all weapons is also a must, just like the Beast Riders. Mournfang. I'm trying not to grade their points too heavily against them, so we'll settle on a C-. Their War Scroll isn't bad for once, but nobody's buffs can land on them, and they're 100 points per model. And if you start looking at other cavalry that cost 100 points a model, Varangard, Fulminators, maybe save yourself the heartache. It's weird that they don't get a banner or horn at their base unit size unless they're reinforced. Are they the only unit like that in the game? They have very low capturing in this army, and that's a hidden problem with them. I know that cavalry isn't normally good at capturing, but this is kind of the army for it, and it's what they're competing against, and losing to for slots in the army. The new job they got on 4th is really cool, by the way. Anti-Cavalry Interceptor. That's a great idea, and possibly unique, I think, in the game. I don't find them quite able to do that on the table against the kind of cav people are running now, but it's a really good idea. A reinforced unit of 4 Mournfang are a far cry from what I'd call a hammer, and only capture 9, so they're caught in a weird limbo once more. They step on 100-point chaff, but can't hang with anything pricier. Unit size 2 has always really messed with this unit. Suggested fix, points down is the obvious suggestion, 150 and you'd really start to see them, but then they would maybe just get spammed and you still wouldn't be able to build an army around them unless the battle formations got fixed. Similar to the monsters, I think Mournfang should maybe stay expensive, but really be worth it. Pump those stats and capturing up. Let all the buffs land on them like all the buffs can land on Varangard and Dragons. If they're supposed to be alpha cavalry, have them prove it for once. Frost Sabers B+. They technically exist, have move 9, and are capable of standing on the table. All for 70 points, hell, I'll take 2. You can't even shoot them if they're near terrain, scoring you their second battle tactic of the game. Suggested fix, none required. Unironically the best War Scroll in Beastclaw. They have a clear and distinct job, they do it well, and at a good price. You cannot say the same thing about any other Beastclaw unit. In fact, you can't even say 2 of those 3 things about any other Beastclaw unit. Frost Sabers Biss, it's not even close. Icefall Yetis, I give them an FAQ. In the enemy movement phase, these can move 3 and squiggle into combat. In so doing, if you want to perform some of the worst type of new annoying gotcha role, the slide into combat to shut off charges and pin people thing, you could play these. But I'm expecting the redeploy interaction with that to get FAQ'd, and once in combat, unlike corn units and other electric sliders, Yetis at least have the decency to instantly die, instead of being quite strong plus the gotcha effect. Suggested fix, whatever they should do is already done precisely by Gorgers. So I'm not sure. Retirement home? Pure chaff roll, ogre keyword, Thundertusk synergy, hunter synergy. No one wants to play these awful looking things. And we were all kind of waiting to see if they get new sculpts or get dropped. My money's on dropped after seeing what Gorgers look like and do. I don't know. Beastclaw thoughts. For the Gutbusters Summary, I was able to say, it's good. But here's a pinpoint most important thing, second most important thing, order to targeting changes and improvements. But BCR is just that meme of the guy holding pizza in a burning room. They need that thing they said they would do when they went over all the war scrolls and rewrote them for 4th. Except, like, good. The whole side needs an identity refocus compared to Guts and in the game as a whole. Probably as anvils, but I'm open to any suggestion other than what if they were just bad monsters with Capture 10. Getting wards back is one way, but having a shitload of wounds is more on theme, I think, for ogres. However it ends up, we need a massive durability increase, and if that comes at a points increase, so be it. Being good is worth paying for. Being cheap and bad is for horde armies. A step down from that, Stonehorns and Thundertusks need the same identity discussion between each other, since shooting versus melee cannot work if the shooting has to be bad. I'll revisit my other 2 suggestions above here. 1, all Thundertusks are priest, and all Stonehorns aren't, and no trait for it, but everyone's quite durable. Or 2, Frostlords are hammers, Huskguards are priest buff, debuff wagons both, and Beast Riders are true anvils. One of the 2. After that, Everwinter's so unfun, I suggest going back to the drawing board entirely. Putting a Blizzard token on my units, or enemy units, or objectives could all work, certainly not terrain, and certainly not obscuring into very rarely a ward. Our durability should be standard issue, not spinning 10 plates while doing a handstand. Besides that, once a game, roll a die, nothing happens, jump through 3 hoops on a Tuesday style rules need to go away. I could talk about Mournfang and Icebrow Hunter, and the generally uninspiring rampages, but BCR has so many structural problems that I almost feel like getting lost in the weeds would distract from it. Don't be afraid to break from tradition, if traditionally it sucked and everyone hated it. Like the Frost Spear ability, D6 attacks on stomping hooves, Everwinter, Frost Wreath Ice, whatever. Anyway, 4th edition's pretty cool, but this shit sucks. Looking forward to the Battle Tome. See ya.